Have you seen Ice Pirates? Well, I mean, technically it's The Ice Pirates, but here's the trailer.
At last, the space comedy you didn't know you were waiting to see. The Ice Pirates.
In a galaxy where the Galactic Republic has drastically reduced funding to the Intergalactic Customs Enforcement, a group of disgruntled former agents find themselves out of work and direction. Led by the fiercely determined Captain Jason, the Ice Pirates band together to form an unconventional team of misfits, including tech-savvy robot expert Roscoe, ex-thief Monk and Master of the Disguise Killjoy, and a sharp-tongued Princess Karina. Rather than letting their skills go to waste, they decide to patrol the outer reaches of the Republic, targeting smugglers and illegal border crossers.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Wait. I'm sorry. That's my script for Ice Pirates. That's right. This movie deals more with a group of pirates who are trying to break the Templars' control over the water supply. Right. My bad. Let's do this again from the top. The Ice Pirates is about a group of rough and rowdy pirates, more keen to Robin Hood than Blackbeard, who raid the Templar cartel's control over the water trade. Upon one such raid, fates align when the leader of the dreaded pirates, Jason, meets Princess Karina. This puts the two on a journey that eventually leads them to the Seventh World, a mystical planet that contains a wide abundance of water for the whole galaxy.
I like the first one, don't you?
So let's cover a couple of topics. Actors, director, plot, and the humor, because there's a lot of it, and some of it doesn't land unless you're below a certain age. And one of the only topics I am not going to talk about is the music, because the music doesn't have any importance to the movie. It's just background music. Now, I will mention that the composer is Bruce Broughton, whose works include Hawaii Five-O, the original, Quincy M.E., Dallas, Jag, and most recently, The Orville, as well as several movies like The Monster Squad, Rescuers Down Under, Honey, I Blew Up the Kid, So I Married an Axe Murderer, Tombstone, and more recently, Bambi 2, Buck Wild. A fine composer, you might know some of his tunes. The director of this darling of a film is Stuart Raffel. I don't know. Anyways, before Raffel did this movie based on his resume, he was mainly known for his modestly budgeted outdoor films. His work included movies like Napoleon and Samantha, Adventures of the Wilderness Family, Across the Great Divide, and Sea Gypsies. A list of movies that's probably the first time you ever heard of. But Raffel, after making The Ice Pirates, began throwing his weight behind some real big hitters and making his mark on cinema with Mac and Me, Tammy and the T-Rex, and Mannequin 2. When this movie was actually greenlit in 1981, it was given a budget of $20 million by David Beagleman, head of MGM, with John Foreman as producer and Stafford Sherman, writer of Krull, providing the script. But before hiring their director, MGM's board said no to the $20 million budget and lowered the budget to $8 million, really limiting their ability to tell a Star Wars clone-like story. Now, if you know a little more history about David Beagleman, then you'll understand why MGM's board did this. He was infamous at the time in Hollywood for over-budgeting films, and after securing financiers, would then only make the movie for a fraction of the cost, where he and the producers would pocket the rest of the money. So there's no telling actually how much Stuart Raffel was given to make this movie. And looking at the movie itself, I don't think it was the full $8 million. Also, Raffel was well known for creating under-budget films, so that could actually make more sense of why he was hired in the first place. Either way, after his hiring, he insisted on making the movie comedic, and Beagleman and Foreman debated and argued for hours on end before they finally submitted. They didn't give a rat's ass. They were going to rob the place anyways. Now, one of the other interesting tidbits about this movie is the lack of chosen cast. The director didn't get to screen anyone for this movie, and was simply had people chosen at random and was directed to use these people. Robert Urich had a TV deal with MGM, probably Galavan, since I think Spencer for Hire, which aired a year later, was not made by MGM. But Urich was thrust upon the director because MGM wanted it, probably for the sole reason of fulfilling his contract. John Foreman, producer of the film in films like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Bobby Deerfield, and Mannequin 2, you're starting to see that connection between the director, the producer, and Beagleman, wanted a close friend on set, and that's how Angelica Houston got her role. And John Mutzak, I don't think I said that correctly, would go on to play Sloth in The Goonies, was liked by the financiers. So a lot of the starting roles were filled in, not by the casting director. Another little thing about the director, before we get into the plot and all that, Raffel insisted that he and Foreman, the producer, did not watch Star Wars when writing or filming this movie, which I have to call BS. Maybe Stafford Sherman, the other writer of the movie, did, because it's filled with pop culture references, cheeky Star Wars lines, and Robert Urich doing his best Han Solo impression. Now let's move over to the actors, the humor, and the plot of the film. The main cast is Jason, our fearless leader, played by Robert Urich, who is heavily inspired by an over-top Han Solo and is named after Jason of the Argonauts. Princess Karina, or Mary Crosby, is obviously our Princess Leia and is actually introduced in a very similar flowing white gown. And her father are leaders of the secret underground rebel movement trying to undermine the authority of the Empire. Templars. Roscoe, Michael D. Roberts, who I don't really know, as he hasn't been the lead in or sub-lead in many things. And I guess he's just supposed to be our 80s sidekick who's just as lovable as the main lead, because he doesn't make me think about any other character from Star Wars or some other pop culture. And you may say, what about Lando? Well, he doesn't play the role as smooth as Billy D. Williams. Maybe more like Richard Pryor, without the vulgarity or raunchiness. Killjoy, played by John Muzazat. Wonderful character, very funny. Gets more Han Solo the longer the film goes on. That doesn't mean he gets cooler, but he actually begins to have his role diminished until he's standing in front of a blast door for 45 minutes. Zeno and Maida, or Ron Perlman, and Angelica Houston. Angelica Houston probably was the only serious actor in the whole movie. She stands out because of that. And she didn't seem like she saw the script as humorous and thus acted the whole role straight, which makes her memorable. Ron Perlman, at times you completely forget he's in it, and then he's there again. And then we move over to Bruce Valanche, who I think is just playing himself, is introduced in the last 20 minutes of the movie. And I don't really know why. He's just recruited into the film during a fetch quest. And Zorn, played by Jeremy West, who played his role great, but wasn't given nearly enough screen time because, he's a wonderful villain. And a little fact, they actually hired John Carradine, who I kept getting confused with Jeremy West, not because they looked similar, but because John Carradine, who had actually opening credits billings, but they had him come in and play the role of the Supreme Commander for maybe a whopping 2 minutes, instead of just combining Zorn and the Supreme Commander into one. I guess maybe they really wanted this movie to be big and have sequels with John Carradine returning, but he just seems a little bit like a knockoff of the Emperor. And if they really wanted that, then they should have done this with a better budget and actually established the story, which we're about to discuss, and I kind of feel like they didn't. Before we move over to the plot, I wanted to talk a little bit about the sets and the wardrobes, because I forgot to make a note of it beforehand, so this is me just kind of slinging it in there. The sets in this movie are 4, maybe 5 actually built sets, and one lease factory that they shot a number of scenes in, including the ship's hulls for both Templar and Jason's ship, which I just realized isn't even given a name, which I'm going to start calling now the Century Eagle. It also was used for the processing plant. I think even the party scene, or the exit from the party scene, I think was the exterior, maybe some of the interior of the same factory. And then they splashed in a few shots of some real world places. The most elaborate shot was the second planet, where they're looking for information on where to find their pirate helper. Outside of that, the movie had a lot of rinse and repeat with a few paint jobs and furniture changes, and one soundstage that they just filled with fog. Oh, and an opera hall, which they filmed almost the entirety on the stairs. Now, on to the costumes now. The aliens in this are done fantastic, or at least what you expect from a low budget, but there's maybe 5 or 6 total, and a few were reused. And I don't mean the same alien species reused. No, I mean the same guy, especially this guy. And onto the wardrobe. The wardrobe in this is very basic for the princess and the maid, or nanny, as she's called, as they wear very similar outfits throughout the whole movie. Angelica Houston's outfits were nothing more than leotards with shoulder pads, and all the men's outfits were either ceremonial robes for Zorn, cheap pirate outfits that devolved more and more into open blouses with velvet boots, And the Templars look like what you would find in MGM's closets when looking for knights. The pirates at least started this movie in something that you could describe as elaborate, but by the end it just becomes what you kind of find at Party City. So now let's jump into the plot, or really lack of one. The flimsy plot of this movie is that the princess recruits a band of pirates to help her find her father. Kind of. You then have to add in your side plots or your tie-in plots. The pirates are at war with the Templars over their control over the water supply, which the Templars destroyed in the first place to rule over the galaxy, with the added story of trying to find the seventh water planet, which would break the Templars' hold. But none of these storylines actually combine satisfyingly. They kind of jumbled them together in the end to make the movie work. If the movie was just about Jason and his crew of pirates discovering a world covered in water, which could be used to break the hold of the Templars' water rationing, that could have been interesting. Or maybe the movie could have been about an evil Templar order that wants to seize control over the galaxy by getting rid of planetary leaders who challenge their rule, which ultimately leads to the princess on a journey to find her missing father and teaming up with Jason and the crew. But the movie doesn't really choose a route, and because of that, it devolves into fetch quest. They go to this planet to find this person, then they go to this desert to find said person, then they go to this planet to find this person, then they go to these coordinates because the last person told them that's where they should go. It doesn't really have a story that binds the film together. I'm going to use Star Wars again as an example. It reminds me a lot of Rise of Skywalker, where the whole movie was written with "and then" or "then this happened" instead of using "because." So there's no real consequences to certain characters' actions. The story just keeps progressing. The beginning of this film, especially with them raiding the Templar ship, actually felt like a movie's supposed to feel. Our heroes raid a Templar ship for ice, only to be captured. They are taken to the Templar world, where they're forced to become lobotomized eunuchs, but our heroes Jason and Roscoe are saved by the princess. But after that, that's when it just devolved into fetch quest. And the story that they could have told began to get very muddled, because they didn't know how to actually bind the three plots ideas into one, and instead they focused entirely on comedy to keep you interested. Also, if you're going to try to convince me that the people are in desperate need of water, then maybe having a lovemaking scene that is a simulation of a thunderstorm with rain and wind included, probably not the wisest decision. Now, on to the humor of this movie. It has at least 2 bathroom jokes. This, which actually takes place in a bathroom.
Sorry.
And this one.
Get in there! Go on! Go! Oh, God.
And I think that's the only bathroom humor, maybe. But the humor in this movie is funny, but they could have pushed the envelope a little more, make it a little raunchier. But the movie is more family-friendly for the most part. The movie does contain a lot of pop culture references, including the inclusion of Logan's Run's dome. But the part that I truly enjoyed was the bounty hunter Mad Max parade float. There's something I just find comical about a bounty hunter pirate bandit charging into battle with an inflatable skull on the front of his vehicle and laser Gatling guns pointed at his crew's backs. But what really added to this scene was that they kind of recreated a scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark, where our hero is being pulled behind his own weird triangular car by a whip before climbing up onto the vehicle and defeating the bad guys. Now, you could make the argument, since I'm doing it to myself, that maybe George Lucas was inspired by the same movie as Raffle, as many of Lucas's works was nothing more than copying and pasting of old movies. Since in my head, I can see this exact same scene with a stagecoach or a horse. But the fact that Lucas and Spielberg's Raiders of the Lost Ark came out 3 years before this one. But now we have to cover the most unneeded but funny joke of the movie. Raffle must have realized that they needed to kill time between the space voyage and didn't know how to tie in a floating ball and saber training. So instead he gave us aliens, or at least the infant chestburster. After arriving on the ship, a piece of cargo gets loose and infects the ship with
Space Harpy.
Now, I don't know who infected the ship, but I know it couldn't have been Jason. He always wears.
Big surprise, Daddy.
No, that's
Never mind. To stop on this and talk about it for a little bit, the space herpes is a gag that doesn't have any follow-up. It's literally a 1 to 2 off joke that isn't mentioned or has repercussions again. You'll see it during the dinner scene and near the end of the movie, just sliding its way through the ship. It's just a gag, needed filler, and a good way to poke fun at another movie. And one final mention of the film scenes, it's the time dilation moment. Near the end of the movie, after Jason and Princess Karina have slept together, they rejoin the crew on the bridge as they now have entered the thin path to Earth between a time dilation field. That's when Zorn, the not Supreme Commander, assaults their ship and knocks them off path. You get the first hintings that they have gone off track as the princess begins to feel a little woozy. Jason and the crew assemble to fight back the attackers, with Jason swinging by the princess's room to discover, well, his child. But this whole shenanigans outside of this robot works really well. It feels like the beginning and the ending of the movie is written terrifically with humor, like the princess looking for the nanny.
Jason, don't be disturbing Nanny. She's getting very old. Nanny?
And the end of the movie with the robots closing in on Jason and the princess coming to his side. Ignore her hair getting caught here. They didn't have time to reshoot this. Then being saved by their own son, who swings in on a rope, because there's so many ropes in this movie. There's just ropes everywhere. But this movie's ending really redeemed a lot of the 45 minutes of fetch quest schlock, and it's memorable. I kind of wish they didn't reverse time when they got back on track. Maybe have it where Jason and the princess retire on the newfound water planet, while their son and old Angelica Houston leave them behind to tell the galaxy about their new discovery. But, you know, the ending was fine. It just had everybody reverse age. Also, Angelica Houston was the only crew member that they didn't show growing old. And maybe Bruce Valanche. But that sums up a lot of the humor, the plot, the characters, and background knowledge. But this movie leaves many unanswered questions. Like, why did the Templars destroy the water planets? Was it really just for greed and power? There could have been more. How did Earth wind up where it is? And how do I cure space herpes? No real defining answers to our problems. To me, though, the movie was a better Star Wars clone with just as good humor, if not better, than Spaceballs. But that's our movie. I would highly recommend this movie, and I don't really want to give it a rating. I mean, story-wise and plot-wise, it would be like a 3. But if you're like me, you'll find this movie immensely enjoyable. And I hope you do. But outside of that, you guys have a good one. Bye.